Yep.
Okay.
You understand. Good. Let's have a look into the last piece of what is entrepreneur, what is financial entrepreneur. And when we talk about entrepreneur, it is always, when we talk about financial entrepreneur, it's always seen from the startup owner. When we say entrepreneurial finance, it always means always look at the things from the point of view of the entrepreneur having doing or undertakes a startup. Yeah? That is our first view. And then we talk about the other people actually giving money, whatever support. Okay, the venture capital. Now we are in this origin venture capital, not in the very early stages, etc. But also there are people, they talk about venture capital, and they mean everything what we have seen. They mean bootstrapping, angel, whatever. They don't make the difference. They tell and talk about venture capital and mean everything what we were discussing right now. Okay, venture capital is the business investing in new or young companies with innovative ideas. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. It started more or less in the beginning of the 20th century. So in the beginning of 1920, whatever. The problem is that we were always in wars. Huh? So we had the First World War in Europe. I don't know what happened in China, beginning of the 20th century.
Beginning of the 20th century is it's a revolution in China, which the empire has gone.
So that was the revolution against the last king?
Yes, it was in 1911.
Yeah, 11 to 16, I think. Something like
the 1911 is the beginning of the Republic of China.
Okay, so that means that was the final. What was the final era? The final king. What kind of dynasty was it?
It was Qing dynasty, started from 100 years ago, 1970s to 17th century to 1911.
Okay.
1911 is the end,
Okay, and that was a war between the old dynasty, the latest one or the last one, and the revolution.
Yes.
Guys. And the dynasty was then supported by the English, US, and French, right?
Several countries. It's
yes.
eight different countries. Yes, 8 different countries.
Okay, and that means they built, or they gave their support to the dynasties, and what I have read is they got bonds for it, railway bonds, etc., from the Chinese government.
Yes. they send several banks nowadays in Hong Kong.
Yeah, so they got the bonds which covered the loans. I think they called super specialis or railway bonds, right? That's what I have. I just want to. I think I have pictures of those bonds. I just try to. They looked like this.
Mm-hmm.
These were the bonds the government gave to the
the railway.
Yes, to the English, French, and U.S. They gave the money to your dynasty people to fight against the revolutionaries, and for that money, your government gave the bonds as a security, as a backup. And they look like this, very nice in light blue.
But unfortunately, it doesn't work now.
And now all the people are waiting for that the government pays back.
It's already 100 years ago things, and the old government has been totally destroyed by the revolution government, which is nowadays this revolution government is in Taiwan. And
the point is that that of course everybody who lends money has to pay it back.
So it's very hard to get things done, because you don't even know which government should pay for this, and the both governments says, okay, that's not belong to my, because
It is a difficult piece, but I wanted to show you these kind of bonds, how they look like. They're very nice ones.
Yes.
And so they are.
And that's remind me of one of the news that's in American, today's in American, some of the people in the parliament says we should let them pay the Qing dynasties, which is exactly the bonds like that.
Yeah. Yeah, because the problem is always the same. If the Americans or the Germans say, Mrs. Merkel tells the bonds my former chancellors gave are not valid anymore, so we don't pay back. And that is the basic problem. I know that the Russians, they paid, I think 2 years ago, they paid back bonds. They were edited 60 years ago. Because there were so much pressure from the international fund and the World Bank and all of this. They mostly do the pressure. So, okay. We go back to reality. So, okay, so the history of no. So let's start from the very beginning. My goodness. Here we are. Okay, so Ray Chan to all. What is this in Chinese? Ray, what did you write?
We just talk about the history.
Okay.
It's I said it's 8 countries.
8 countries were financing this stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And what does it mean?
Haha do and just haha.
Okay.
Just laughing.
Okay. And the text under it?
The last is the name of the countries.
Okay.
The eight countries.
Okay.
And alliance, yeah.
This writing is a miracle. It's incredible. It's incredible how you describe the issue in these little tiny paintings.
Maybe we hold the same opinion that the Western treats the Chinese was like a painting, and because Japan culture are close to us, so we can understand some part of Japan. But the Korean, both North and South Korean changed their words since the 1950. The Korean War, and their words we totally don't understand the Korean words, and that's also we treat it also like something like painting.
Incredible. Okay. Started beginning the 20th century where we all have been in wars. So probably the venture guys were mostly thinking about weapons. Yeah, that was one big investment area where they built any kind of weapons. Vanderbilt was a Dutch family, very wealthy, and Rockefeller, you know. And they started to invest in companies. Yeah. And one of the first capital firm was Whitney and Company. And they did, how do you say, engines for aeroplanes and all of this. Yeah. Then the Research Development Center. Then then we had an energy center, DOE. I don't know how it was called. So you see, most of it came after the Second World War. So after 46, 47. And so that was the starting point of it. And what can I say? During the 80s, 90s, it grew up, and it mostly grew in the Anglo-American area, like US and Great Britain. In the Western Hemisphere, these countries were the most aggressive or the most intense financiers of ideas and gave capital out of this. In Germany, it was everything came years later. Up to this point, let's say 15 years ago, most of the ventures were financed by governmental organizations or by banks, which are also were part of the governmental financial system. And then more and more, the private investors came into the game, and the first bonds, the first funds were generated. So, what is the time? 12:40. This is, I think, something we do next week because it takes too long. Let me check. This video is quite interesting. We were talking about a company should be in the market at the right time, with the right resources, with the right investor, etc. And we just mentioned the value of customers. Means when we have this customer, what revenue and profit will a customer of us generate through the time he is customer for and in our company. So that means when we start a relationship with our customer, either by internet or within a shop, etc., I want to keep him as long as possible, to make as much money out of it with one or more products or services. And this earnings per customer, of course, I have to find out, I have to have a prognosis on this, a forecast. And of course, if I have an idea about the earnings, I have to minus all of this by the acquiring cost. So requiring a customer costs, advertising, exhibitions, mailings, etc. So all these costs are in the beginning of a customer relationship to acquire a customer. So if you think about starting a business, this is also part of the business plan we talk about. Beside planning all kind of costs, etc., planning all kind of investments, etc., and product values, we have to tell the investor about acquiring the right people in the right market, and how long do we think the customer is with us, and how much and how often will a customer buy our product. So let's have a look at this. At this video, and probably one information up front. This guy tells us about this environment of costs and benefits through customers, and it tells us a little story about, who knows the company Wayfair? It's probably a company which is somebody knows Wayfair? No? This company is not that old, and they are selling furnitures and accessoires for houses and flats, etc., and most of it via internet. So up to now, they don't have shops. They sell all of this, all of the products via internet. So, and this professor was a professor at Wharton Business School, which is a very famous business school in US. It's like Haas School at the university in Berkeley. And they made a research also about this Wayfair company. And this research has to do with customer value and acquisition costs related to the value of a company. So just have this in mind, and then we can talk about it later on. So always a problem with the where's the voice?
So what do marketers talk about when they talk about marketing? Well, they tend to talk about actions, they talk about activities, they talk about tactics, they talk about the products they develop, the services that they deliver, how they get this stuff out there, the prices that they charge. So much of the conversation is about what they do, but so little of it is about who they do it to or who they do it with. And of course, I'm talking about the customers. I'm the customer guy. And I want to talk to you about this idea of customer centricity. And it's not what you think. You're thinking, marketing professor, customer centricity. Oh, I know. You're going to talk all about how the company needs to surround itself around the customer, and it's their job to make every customer happy. We can't sleep at night until the least happy customer is satisfied. Nah, I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff over there. I think about those notions about the customer is always right is wrong. I think it's irresponsible. I think it's ineffective. And I think following those ideals is actually way out of line with the best practices that we see across the other parts of the organization. So when I talk about customer centricity, I'm talking about which are the customers that we should be surrounding. Who are the best customers? Who are the customers who are most valuable to us? And what is it that we can do to enhance their value extract some of that value from our shareholders, and find more customers like them. That's customer centricity. And it's not limited just to marketing. It really should be a company-wide strategy that if we can figure out who the most valuable customers are, and if we can find ways to use that for product development, sales and service, distribution, and so on, we can make more money than if we just obsess over version 2.0 of the product. Now, I've written 2 books on this topic. The titles might not be that interesting or that diagnostic, but the subtitles, they hit the nail on the head. The first one is focus on the right customers for strategic advantage. The second one, the newer one, implement a winning strategy driven by customer lifetime value. That's really the main thing that I focus on in my research, is this idea of customer lifetime value. A lot of people talk about it some kind of as if it's just an abstract concept. You can't really do it, but it's fun to think about the different long-run value of each customer. It's my job to really do it. It's my job to take this concept and make it real and make it actionable and help it make a difference for companies. Think about it this way. If I can project how long my relationship with you is going to last, how many transactions or interactions you're going to have over that horizon, and how valuable each one of those interactions will be, and basically add all that stuff up, I can come up with a pretty good guess of your lifetime value. This is what I've been doing research on for most of my 32 years here on the Penn faculty. But it's getting out of the laboratory, getting out of the academic journals, and bringing it to the real world. Back in 2015, I co-founded my first company, Zodiac, and that was exactly the idea, was to take these models and implement them at full commercial scale and educate companies about all the great things that they could do if they knew the value of their customers. And the results were awesome. First of all, it was an incredible validation of the models. They really work. Secondly, it was great to see companies making more money by being able to identify the differential value of customers and then taking the right actions based on the customers. And third, it was really interesting to see such a crazy, staggering variety of use cases. So besides trying to predict how often you're going to buy stuff at Amazon, or how many rides you're going to book on Lyft, or how many hotel stays you're going to reserve at a Hyatt, look at some of these other applications over here. So we're not just talking about customers doing things over time, but any time we're talking about a different kind of entity, whether it's a customer, whether it's a physician, whether it's an animal, whether it's a library book, and we're looking to see how many times it's done the thing in the past, and we have a desire to project how often will it do it in the future, or is it still even active at all? It's incredible how this simple math can be broadly applied to so many other domains. Well, Zodiac was a great success, but if you notice, I'm talking in the past tense about it, because in March of 2018, we sold the company to Nike. That by itself was just an incredible validation, such an amazing company wanting to embrace these ideas, these techniques, and going out there and really changing their own practices. That's been wonderful. But it doesn't mean that my passion about customer centricity, that my mission to bring it to all kinds of different companies and organizations has ended. Basically, instead of focusing purely on marketing, let's think about some of the other areas of application. So when it comes to new product development, looking at companies like Electronic Arts, the gaming company, who looks at the lifetime value of each and every of 1 billion customers around the world to determine which kinds of new games to come up with. Or companies like Merial, the veterinary pharmaceutical company down in Georgia that uses lifetime value to realign and incentivize all of its salespeople. Or how about this last one over here? Customer-based corporate valuation. Maybe a marketer like me has to say something to the people in finance. That's the nature of my new startup, Theta Equity Partners. As it says here, we're revolutionizing finance through customer-based corporate valuation. The basic idea is pretty simple, that if we can project how many customers we're going to acquire, how long they're going to stay, how many transactions they're going to make, and how valuable those transactions will be, we can do a better job than the usual top-down ways of forecasting revenue determining what the company as a whole is worth, and giving companies guidance as to what they should be doing in order to run their businesses more effectively. I want to share with you just a couple of examples. One of them was one I'm thankful to many of my Penn students for. Back in 2017, I gave my students data from Dish Network, a subscription TV company that many of you might know about. And I said, taking this historical data, I want you to project how many customers Dish is going to acquire for each of the next 4 quarters. And then we waited weeks and weeks after the assignment was done. We got a chance to compare their forecasts with the so-called experts on Wall Street. And it was very interesting. In the first week of May 2017, Dish announced that they had acquired 547,000 new customers. Wall Street was very disappointed. The consensus estimate was 13% higher. They lost $1 billion of shareholder value in a week. How did our Penn students do? They hit the nail right on the head. Their average estimate was 550,000 new customers, within 0.5% of the actual number. And if we roll ahead to the quarter after that, just as close. So by bringing in some understanding of marketing, of how customers behave, how they differ from each other, and by breaking down their behavior into these different components that I mentioned, we can do a better job than Wall Street. Let me give you one other example. A company that many of you might be familiar with, Wayfair, big online furniture company out of Boston. Look at these revenue numbers. Wow. I mean, this company is just an incredible Wall Street darling. They're just making all this money. But here's the question. We don't care about how much money you made in the past. We care about how much money you're going to make in the future. And looking at these revenue numbers, can we go a little bit deeper than that? Instead of just saying all dollars are created equal, let's try to break it down once again into, well, how many customers are we going to continue to acquire? How long will they continue to transact with us? How many transactions will they make? And how valuable will they be? One of the amazing things about Wayfair hasn't only been its financial performance, but their willingness to actually share metrics that relate to some of these customer behaviors. And if you think about it, the way that it works with most publicly traded companies is all they reveal to Wall Street is the bare minimum revenues. Wayfair goes further than that. And I know it's really hard to see here, but they also tell the street how many customers did they acquire in this last quarter? How many total orders were placed on the website? And what was the number of active customers, new or existing customers, who placed those orders? Using that kind of very rich and very unusual information, we can actually break down the revenues into the different behavioral components that I was talking about before. Again, without getting into all the details, it's actually remarkable how well we can take these models and project new customers to be acquired, the length of their lifetimes, and so on. Not get into the details, but if you're interested, here's a paper that I wrote with former Penn student Dan McCarthy that shows how we can take the publicly available data on a company, do this kind of breakdown, then build it up to come up with more accurate assessments of revenue and overall firm valuation than if you had just looked at the raw revenue numbers. So let me show that to you. So here's the basic idea. We have these separate models that are picking up these different aspects of behavior. Now, we know that no model is perfect. So we take our models, we take the parameters, and we perturb them a little bit. So we come up with different kinds of revenue projections. I'm going to show you right here several thousand different possible revenue projections. The dark line over here being our best guess, but wide variety of different possible scenarios around them. Some of them are much better than others, but all of them have one thing in common, the same basic shape, which if you haven't been forecasting revenue before, and I suspect you have, it might not be as alarming to you as it is to me. So usually what happens with revenues is they look much smoother, because usually as you start to saturate all of the new customer acquisitions, there's enough repeat purchasing going on that the company stays really healthy. This one's really different. Wayfair is an acquisition machine, but not a very well-oiled one. They're bringing in lots and lots of customers, but they're doing so in a very expensive manner, and those customers aren't sticking around and buying over and over again as they should. If you look at their own data, the velocity of customer acquisition is just way, way, way greater than the ongoing repeat buying. And at some point that will stop. At some point, this company will crash. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying it's going to happen next year. It might happen 10 years from now. I'm not sure. That's why we have all these different scenarios. But they all paint a fairly grim picture. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take these revenue trajectories, all of them from as of May of 2017, and for each one of them, we're going to do all the accounting and finance stuff to come up with an overall valuation for the firm as a whole. And that's what we see right over here. In May of 2017, the company was trading for about $65 a share. Our estimate across all these different scenarios, good and bad, is that the company's worth about $10 a share. We wrote a paper on it, you just saw it. We posted the first version of it to some academic website in September of 2017. Why would anyone pay attention to an academic paper from a couple of marketing professors? Well, it's kind of interesting to see